Now that Asian racism is in the conversation and being taken seriously right now, let's talk about the times that I faced racism growing up as an Asian in the American Midwest. The thick skin you have to develop growing up in a white suburb of Minnesota.
I'm gonna speak on it. Y'all need to take the N-word out of your vocabulary because it's disgusting and disrespectful as fuck.
Bro, I swear Southeast Asian racism hits different. People are literally like, oh, you're Filipino? Does that mean you speak Chinese? Like, fuck no! Are you stupid?
History of Asian American racism and discrimination, let's talk about Yuri Kochiyama. By the 1960s, she was an active part of political protests, fighting for black civil rights, anti-war, Puerto Rican independence, freeing U.S. political prisoners, reparations for Japanese American citizens, and much more. She was really good friends with Malcolm X and was right by his side when he was murdered.
In fact, our greatest allies have been the black community. Black and Asian solidarity has a long history.
Because I'm tired of black people using the race card all the time and then be also white people. You need to step up. Stop self-deprecating because of your ancestors' sins. Stop apologizing for something that you didn't do.
Get out.
The phrase "Stop Asian Hate" isn't doing enough to highlight how white supremacy is at the root of this hate. Stop Asian Hate just says like, hey, stop hating Asian people.
When I moved to US, the biggest disappointment was racism. I was shocked.
Tell me why every time I post something about Southeast Asians and East Asians, I get East Asians in my comments saying, oh, but we're both Asian, or why are you hating on another Asian? Then y'all make it very clear that Southeast Asians and all different kind of Asians are very different from East Asians because y'all think you're at the top of the hierarchy? Now all of a sudden it's Hakuna Matata because you're all getting exposed. Now you want to be Asian together. No. I'm Southeast Asian. I'm Filipino. I'm not one of y'all. I'm not one of y'all. You think I give a shit about you? Let's talk about how you call Filipinos dirty. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about...
What we just heard isn't new. It's a reflection of something that has been quietly shaping hearts for generations. Racism that doesn't only come from white America, but from within communities that were once victims of it too. Anti-Blackness in parts of Asian community didn't begin online. It was planted long ago through colonization, through media that glorified whiteness and told the world who deserved love and who deserved suspicion. And yet, history reminds us, when the system tried to divide, there were voices that stood together. Black and Asian activists marching side by side, fighting the same power that profits from their separation. So today we're not here to point fingers. We are here to ask why these divisions still exist and what it would take for these two powerful communities to stand as allies once again. Because maybe the real enemy was never each other, but the system that keep Americans divided. I want us to watch these clips carefully and understand what is being said. This video is for educational purposes and all credits belong to original creators of the clips used in this video. Let's get into it.
I think I needed to film this video because a lot of times when I see videos criticizing Bay Area Asians for saying the N-word, a lot of times in the comment sections, they'll be like, oh, well, you're not even from the Bay Area, so you don't even know our culture, you don't even know our history, etc., etc. Like, you don't even get, like, to speak on it. Okay, then as somebody born and raised in the Bay Area who is a proud Asian American from East Oakland specifically, a lot of times when you check a fellow Asian on them saying the N-word and to tell them to take it out of their vocabulary, the first thing they will say is, oh, well, you don't know where I'm from though. You don't know where I grew up. I grew up in a black neighborhood. I got black family. I got a black auntie, okay? And all that type of nonsense. What I'm hearing, again, you can correct me if I'm wrong. You could check me if I'm wrong. I'm open to criticism. I'm open to educating myself further on this topic, 100%. What I'm hearing is you grew up with black people that you feel so comfortable to disrespect them. You grew up with black people, so you feel comfortable saying a disrespectful ass slur. That's what I'm hearing. Because at the end of the day, that's what it is. How are you saying a slur that has no historical or ancestral connection to you and trying to justify it with the logic of, oh, well, it's the environment I grew up in? I'm from East Oakland. I grew up in the Dubs, bitch. I've never said the N-word. So I know you're not going to blame it on your environment. Because there's many Asian people who grew up in those same environments and never had the slur in their vocabulary in the first place. So it don't make no sense. Again, at the end of the day, when people use that as a logic to justify them saying a slur rooted in the enslavement, dehumanization, lynching, murders, R-word, SA of Black American communities, because that's what the weight of the word is. When y'all use that logic of, oh, it's my environment, I grew up this way, as a way to justify being disrespectful and saying a slur that has no association with you, this is what I'm hearing. You grew up with Black people, so you think it's okay to disrespect them. You're too comfortable to disrespect Black people. That's what I'm hearing. And again, y'all can clock me, y'all can check me if I'm wrong. But honestly, I don't think so, because that's what I'm hearing. That's what I'm hearing. What do you mean you grew up with Black people, so you say the N-word? What do you mean you grew up with Black people, so you feel so comfortable to disrespect them? But when somebody calls your mama a bitch, it's like, whoa, don't call my mama a bitch though. And it's like, whoa, but I didn't mean bitch in that way. I didn't mean bitch in that way. But you're still gonna take offense to it. So how does that logic not apply the same way? And this topic always deeply irritates me because it's common fucking sense. How at your grown age are you still trying to justify saying a slur? And the justification, the logic behind the way y'all be trying to justify saying the N-word makes no sense. It's your environment. Like, you grew up with Black people, so you feel so comfortable to disrespect them? That don't make any sense. You grew up with your mama too. Do you be disrespecting her like that? You be calling your mama a bitch? Like, what? What? And this topic is something I genuinely feel very passionate about, because I used to call myself a Bay Area Asian because you just don't understand. Like, in the Bay Area, we have such a unique culture, and the ways in which Asian American national identity was birthed and formed here. Like, Oakland Chinatown, the Yellow Peril movement, birthed alongside the Black Panthers, was the first time Asian American, Yellow American national identity was formed. An identity that counteracted white supremacist stereotypical notions of what Asian people look like and operated it in America. And so it's a term that I heavily identified with back then, because it drawed on the memory and legacy of solidarity and activism and national identity building that was so foundational to the articulation and life of Asian Americans in the Bay Area. And now, being a Bay Area Asian, people automatically assume and stereotype you as an Asian person who says slurs. And so growing up now, I've started to distance myself from that self-labeling, because one, I don't want people to think that I'm an Asian person from the Bay Area who says the N-word, because that's never been in my vocabulary. And I definitely look down at Asian people from the Bay Area who say the N-word, because it's honestly so disgusting and gross. And it's so disrespectful. It's so fucking disrespectful, because how are you going to disregard so much history and legacy that we've done in solidarity alongside Black American communities, specifically in the Bay Area, and turn it into like y'all saying slurs? Like, come on, like, what do you mean it's your environment? Bitch, I'm from the same environment. I don't be saying that. Like, what? Like, it's so embarrassing. And it's just honestly like, are y'all not tired of it? Are y'all not tired of saying the same word goddamn every single time at the end of every single sentence? Like, oh my God, like, Jesus Christ. And like, but yeah, that's just honestly my 2 cents. I've started distancing myself from calling myself a Bay Area Asian, because that is our representation. That is our representation. And honestly, I'm embarrassed that that's our representation and not the representation of what our people have done historically, bruh. Like, also, my last note for any of y'all bitches from Walnut Creek, Pleasanton, Concord, who grew up in white environments, trying to check me in the comment section, because I know y'all are out there, y'all Natalie Nuns out there who be saying I'm from the Bay Area, but bitch, we're not talking about that part of the Bay Area, okay? I'm from East Oakland, California, you know, one of the top cities of Bay Area culture. So don't even try to tell me my opinion is incorrect or not valid because I'm from the main city. So yeah, those are my credentials. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
History of Asian American racism and discrimination. Let's talk about Yuri Kochiyama. Kochiyama was a Japanese-American civil rights activist and was born in California. She described herself as a small-town gal and totally apolitical. This all changed when World War II broke out and her father was taken into custody and interrogated by the FBI, despite him being innocent and very ill. He was held for several weeks and died the day after he was released. Kochiyama and the rest of her family were put in the Japanese internment camps for 2 years. By the 1960s, she was an active part of political protests, fighting for black civil rights, anti-war, Puerto Rican independence, freeing U.S. political prisoners, reparations for Japanese American citizens, and much more. She was really good friends with Malcolm X and was right by his side when he was murdered. She was right there holding his head. Post 9/11, she called upon the Asian American community and made connections between the racial profiling of Muslims and Arabs to those of the Japanese Americans after Pearl Harbor. She was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize in 2005 and died in 2013 at the age of 93. Check back for more. The biggest problem that I have with the Stop Asian Hate movement is the focus on individual responsibility. The phrase Stop Asian Hate isn't doing enough to highlight how white supremacy is at the root of this hate. Stop Asian Hate just says like, hey, stop hating Asian people. And unfortunately, when we do that, people just get to say, well, I don't hate Asian people, so it's not about me. When ultimately we know that in order to stop Asian hate, we need to dismantle white supremacy. And it's about us as a whole, as a community, not just individuals hating Asians.
This couldn't be farther from the truth. In fact, our greatest allies have been the Black community. Black and Asian solidarity has a long, long history. And that's not to erase the examples from both sides of intolerance, hate, and violence. But at our best, we've long fought alongside each other, such as Frederick Douglass advocating for Chinese and Japanese immigration in 1869. Or when Henry Turner and Ida B. Wells spoke out on behalf of Filipino freedom fighters. Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali, Martin Luther King, and many Black protesters condemning the violence and war in Vietnam. Japanese Americans fighting alongside the Black community to repeal the Emergency Detention Act. The powerful relationship between Yuri Kochiyama and Malcolm X. Grace Lee Boggs and her husband James Boggs. Jesse Jackson, the NAACP for Vincent Chin. And the majority of Asian Americans who support the Black Lives Matter movement.
Bro, I swear Southeast Asian racism hits different. People are literally like, oh, you're Filipino? Does that mean you speak Chinese? Like, fuck no! Are you stupid? Or if you're like Vietnamese, they're like, oh, is that some city in China? You're dumb as fucking bricks, dog. I swear Southeast Asians always get compared to East Asians. Like, dog, we all have our different cultures. And I'm fucking sick and tired that Southeast Asians get mistaken for either Chinese, Japanese, or Korean. Like, fucking lock in. Maybe you should do some studying before you yap your fucking mouth off. I recommend using Mind Grasp.
Sure, let me tell you this. So, Korean people are very somehow close-minded. They don't really familiar with different people. When they think about like foreign people, they are only familiar with, USA or white people or some European. They don't know much about, other people, other countries or other, nationality. Not because they're ignorant or something like that. It's just like they never had a chance to, get to know them. Media is a big part. Media only shows, white people or black people even. They think like all the black people are like, drug dealers or gangsters or they're making, lots of trouble, things like that. Even though it's not true. You know what I mean? Because I'm just telling the truth, guys. It's just like a media, and that's how people think, because they only watching those kind of media through news or Hollywood movies, right? So and also our media showing that a lot of Philippines or Bangladesh, all those Southeast Asia, it's the cheap labor, right? So people come here and work in South Korea, so they think they only see like people who's coming here. That's the only people who they experience while they're living in Korea. You know what I mean? There's a lot of tourists as well, a lot of rich people or wealthy people who come to Korea and travel around. But there's a more chance, more people we see in the media or in real life. That's why people immediately think when you are like color, so they are like, oh, you think like you are poor and they treat you bad. This is like a hard, like sad effect.
When I moved to US, the biggest disappointment was racism. I was shocked. So many times white people, Latina, black people told me, go back to China. It was always unexpected, unpleasant, but honestly, somehow I didn't care. I didn't care. What really was painful for me, racism which came from Asian Americans, from Korean Americans, South Korean Americans, Chinese Americans, never from Japanese Americans, never, or other Asians. They told me, you look like Asian. I said, yes, I am right, I am Asian. They laughed. Ha 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 ha, no, you are not Asian. You are not real Asian. Actually, I am very confident, but I don't know why it was so painful for me. I didn't choose my race. It wasn't my decision, but I'm proud to be Asian. Very proud. Race is not about culture or history. Race is about anthropology and biology. If someone does believe that I should get some permission or approval from them to have right feel myself Asian, I would like to say to all of them, I can't say here what I want to say because of TikTok's rules and regulations. But I think you understand me.
Because I'm tired of black people using the race card all the time and then being... Also, white people, you need to step up. Stop self-deprecating because of your ancestors' sins. Stop apologizing for something that you didn't do.
In Get Out, the Asian character aligns himself with whiteness.
In Do the Right Thing, the Asian character aligns himself against whiteness, so much that he claims blackness, but only when it was convenient for him to save himself.
Are Asian people next in line to be white? Whiteness isn't just about skin color. Whiteness is actually inscribed into the law itself. And we could see how Asian Americans have attempted to claim legal whiteness and were then shown their place in America's racial hierarchy.
1922. Takao Ozawa was born in Japan and lived in the US for 20 years. He applied for naturalization.
Instead of challenging the constitutionality of these racial restrictions, Ozawa claimed the Japanese people, because they were so light-skinned, should be considered free white persons. The Supreme Court unanimously ruled against Ozawa, stating that the words white person only referred to those of the Caucasian race.
Whiteness as a concept continued to evolve.
And this is how the law acknowledged that race is a social construct. Whiteness emerged as an ideology and a legal framework to ensure that a certain group of people held power over others.
This time in the Mississippi Delta during the age of racial segregation.
1927, Gong Lum, a Chinese-American grocery store owner in the South, sues his local white public school for kicking out his daughter, Martha Lum, for being colored. Instead of claiming that segregated schools are inherently unequal, the Lum family tries to claim that Martha Lum was not colored.
the court unanimously ruled against the Lum family, stating that segregated education was to be divided between the pure white or Caucasian race and colored people, which explicitly meant the brown, yellow, and black races.
And because Martha Lum was supposedly part of the Mongolian or yellow race, she could not be enrolled in white schools.
No matter how light-skinned, how financially successful, how model of a minority Asian people may be, they will never be considered white.
Claiming whiteness will never work as a response to racial injustice, because whiteness and white supremacy is actually about producing and maintaining inequality. Resorting to anti-Blackness will not only hinder justice for Asian Americans, but all communities who are perceived as not white. When I hear the phrase, Asians are next in line to be white, I replace the word white with disappear. Asians are next in line to disappear.
We are reputed to be so accomplished and so law-abiding, we will disappear into this country's amnesiac fog.
We will not be the power, but become absorbed by power. Not share the power of whites, but be stooges to a white ideology that exploited our...
Now that Asian racism is in the conversation and being taken seriously right now, let's talk about the times that I faced racism growing up as an Asian in the American Midwest. The thick skin you have to develop growing up in a white suburb of Minnesota. I was the only Asian kid, or one of the only Asian kids, in every school that I went to. So you always have like the classic, like they'll do this with their eyes when I was growing up, which is crazy. Like they'll never know how to pronounce your name and never even try. Honestly, a really sad memory I had was I was always made fun of for the lunches I would bring. So there was a day that I brought rice and like this type of dry pork. It's called jabang in Vietnamese, and it was one of my favorite things to eat ever. And I brought it to lunch and I was so excited to eat it. And then a bunch of the popular boys in elementary school, I was like in 4th grade or something, they came and they were like, what is that? And they were like kind of making fun of it, and then they like wanted to try it, and I think it was so good and delicious, so I was like, yeah, try it. And then they were like eating, they'd be like, whoa, like what is that? And then I just felt really embarrassed and they were totally shaming me for it. So I remember that night I came home and I told my mom, I was like crying, and I said, I only want American lunches from now on. Like, we have to pack sandwiches. So we went to the grocery store and I made her help me like pick out bread and peanut butter and jelly. And I never really ate those things. I mean, I would prefer my rice lunches, but I remember from then on, I started only packing peanut butter sandwiches, which is so sad. But sometimes you just like assimilate out of survival. I remember there were times, especially walking around in Europe, but even like where I was growing up, where people would be like, oh, are you from China? Are you Chinese? Like, ni hao, when just because you're Asian doesn't mean that you're Chinese. I remember there was a time I was in Italy, and Italy is obviously like really racist to Asians, or maybe it's not obvious, but that is true. Like, they will say ni hao if you're walking across the street. But it was an American family that we were sitting next to in front of the dinner table at a restaurant in Italy, and they were like ching chong to us and like doing the eyes at me. And I remember I was like 15, like 14 or 15, and I was literally trying my best not to cry. I remember that was like such a hurtful experience. That was like a really blatantly racist experience. There was also another time growing up, I would go to temple every Sunday, not because we were religious, but because there was a Vietnamese school after service. So that's where I would learn Vietnamese and like practice reading and writing Vietnamese. Then the school went secular and they started renting from the high school right next to the temple, which was a Christian school, like a Catholic private school. We would rent from them on Sundays, and we would like, they would split it with barriers in half from like their Sunday service and then our Vietnamese school on the other side of the school. But their side of the school had all the water fountains. You guys kind of get where this is coming at. So we would always have lunch period where we would kind of have recess and play with the kids. And I was a teaching assistant because I was like 16 or 17. I had graduated and I was teaching the kids. So I was like a TA there. After recess, like all the kids would be really thirsty. So then I would sneak them over the border to drink from this one water fountain. And there was one day that I got caught by like one of the Christian ladies there. And she was like, what are you doing on this side? And I was like, sorry, they wanted water. Like they were thirsty. She was like, you don't belong on this side of the school. And I was like, what? Like, okay, sorry. And she's like, you don't belong here. Do you get me? You don't belong here. Like, it was clear what she was trying to say. And I just remember like feeling so hurt. And I was only 16 or 17. And my dad, who was the president of the school, or like one of the founders of the school, like came over. He's like, what's going on here? And she was like, you guys don't belong here. Like, and he apologized that we were on their side of the school. But then she kept saying that, and he was like, okay, be careful, because when you say you don't belong here, that can mean a lot of things. I just remember he was defending me. But those were some of like the stories that I can remember. I'm sure there's so much that I blacked out and blocked out from growing up in like the suburbs of Minnesota. Being one of the only Asian people growing up, did a number on me. Like, you definitely learn how to have thick skin and how to be proud of yourself regardless of what people think of you. But it's actually crazy that, like, I had to, like, grow up.
I want to talk about the prevalence of internalized racism and shame in the Asian community. Recently, I've seen a rise of the suddenly I love being Asian trend. I've seen Asian women saying, am I chopped or am I just Asian? And I've seen Asian men doing it as well, saying that Asian men are the least attractive demographic. My knee-jerk reaction to all of these is to get mad. Because Asian people are not unattractive by any means. Asian men have been underrepresented as attractive in the Western media, but they've literally never been ugly. Asian people have never been ugly. I'm getting sick and tired of seeing this narrative pushed by our own people. Do you realize that by saying this?
When you're Asian, do you ever grow out of the feeling of like when a guy doesn't like you and you're like, is it because I'm Asian? And like he just doesn't fuck with Asians. And then like in the back of your head, you're like, he just wants to date like blondes with blue eyes.
Do you realize that by saying that, you are putting down your own race? You are insinuating that white people are better than us. You're putting them on a pedestal. There are girls in college saying they wish they were Asian. Like somehow having white blood is better than being fully Asian. Stand the fuck up, y'all. And I'm not showing that video as like the green flag to go and attack that girl. She lives in Utah, and we know that Utah is a white majority place, but I literally grew up in Arkansas. So growing up in a white majority town is not enough explanation, nor is it an excuse for the behavior that I'm seeing. I think it has to do with support. A lot of the people participating in the suddenly I love being Asian trend are adopted, and that makes sense. They weren't exposed to Asian family members or culture, no hate to them. Those that have Asian parents and were raised in a white majority town like me, I'm a little bit less condoning of. It's okay to struggle with your identity. It's not okay to put people down, whether you mean to or not. If you struggle with being proud of your background, surround yourself with people that are like you. Even if it's not possible in real life, it's possible online. Putting yourself in a position where you can gain support from your community is the best reinforcer that there is. Sweetheart, your own community would not say that you're less than because you're Asian. They say that you're less than because you're stupid. It's still a little bit competitive, but at least we're all secretly cheering each other on. And Asian men, a lot of us still think that you're hot. They just don't cast us together in movies because they're racist. Movies are not real life. Jubilee is not real life. I mean, have you seen Zach from Love Island? This is controversial, but Erico is conventionally attractive. I know he's not an actor. When I was like 13 or 14, I slid into Edward Zoe's DMs by sending him fan art, and of course he didn't reply, but...
Question. This actually is a serious question. Why don't you like us Black people? Non-American Asians always gave me the cold shoulder. American Asians were cool and I often hang out with them. Are they just not used to us?
Partially.
Sad to say, but I know that there's anti-Blackness very much so in a lot of Asian American communities. And obviously, unfortunately, anti-Blackness is global. And I think like
it's a very long historical answer.
Yeah.
Some of it has to do with not being used to it. Okay, so colonization happened throughout the whole world when white colonizers took over Asia, Africa, all the other continents. And with that came the belief of anti-Blackness that was instilled upon all of these communities. Now, once those colonizations ended, you were left with this homogenized community where they don't know anyone who don't look like they're all white, all Asian, all South Asian, whatever it may be. And then all of a sudden you fast forward to having technology and Western media, because again, controlled by whiteness, is pushing out this message of that Black communities are gangsters, do this, they do that. And then that media gets pushed out into the world in the form of movies and TV shows. And now you take this homogenized community who has learned anti-Blackness through colonization and stuff like that, on top of the fact that it's then mixed with people who are learning about these races for the first time through fictionized television that is controlled by white media. And then you have this biased look. So when they meet Black people for the first time, they're having to reconcile what they have been essentially brainwashed into thinking versus then trying to figure out what that means when they meet you and they're like, but you're not any of these things. which is the reason why you get a lot of people from Asia who are having to go through that discovery, and Asian Americans who grew up with that and know that those are things that are essentially propaganda, mind washing, to keep upholding this idea of, and instead of using the WS word, I'm going to say anti-Blackness, because one is,
hand in hand,
and they push this anti-Blackness, then it's basically global propaganda. So then people are trying to, come to those terms, and instead of just being hateful, they may just not understand.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And I think that's like the short end of it.
Yeah, I mean, I have nothing to contribute. That was very concise. A lot of people are just conditioned to believe that Black people are whatever the conditioner wants you to believe they are.
Yep.
And like my grandma, she the only Black people she had ever seen were American soldiers in Korea, and to her they were all part of the same group. And then when she came to America, all she knew about Black people was, like you said, what she had seen on TV, what people had told her. And so she was very distrusting of Black people. And I was like, how many Black people are just like everybody else? Like, I go to school with Black kids, like, and she was just like, oh no, they're very dangerous. I'm like, they're not. They're not. This is just what people wanted you to believe. But, what else did she know? You know what I mean? She's just this like, country girl from, uneducated, and is told by everybody in power what to believe. My God is better. My people are better. My guns are better. So she's like, okay, well, all of these things are better. So I better side with the better side.
Now that Asian hate is being talked about again, thanks to Love Island, I thought I would share some of the things that were said to me when I was younger that were pretty racist. Number one, this is actually very ironically related to Love Island. All through elementary school, kids would come up to me in the halls and in the bathrooms and would do the I am Chinese, I am Japanese stupid song with their eyes. I don't understand how that started. And yeah, it was just like a daily occurrence, and I didn't even think to stand up for myself, which was stupid. For two, I feel like every Asian kid goes through this. When I first moved to my school in 5th grade, I was the new kid. I was sitting at the lunch tables kind of by myself, kind of isolated. At the time, they were doing candygrams of some sort, and this boy comes up to me, and I thought he was gonna give me a candygram. I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm the new girl, like la la la. No, he looks at my food. I had brought Chinese dumplings and Chinese rice, and he's making a scene in front of the entire school and is like, ew, like look at her food, la 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 la. Every Asian kid goes through this. And from that moment, I brought pepperoni sandwiches to lunch because I didn't want to do that again. Until high school, when I was like, I shouldn't be ashamed of the things that my parents wake up early and make for me and things that I eat. So whatever. Another super annoying one was in 6th grade. My legal name is CE, but I go by Susie. But we had a substitute teacher in gym, and when you call attendance, my legal name is stated on the paper. So he's like, oh, where's SciY? And I was like, no, like it's CE, but I go by Susie. And he was like, okay, Cece? And I was like, no, like you can call me Susie. And he was like, that's not what's written on the paper. And I was like, yeah, I know, but that's just like what I want to go by, And like, I go by Susie because I choose to go by Susie. I don't even think CE is that hard to say. It's 4 letters long. And he basically like went on this whole thing, and he was like, well, maybe you should just change your name. And I was like, okay, okay. And I remember the first day of every year, I would always just know where my name pops up in the alphabet when they're doing attendance, so I could be like, yeah, like my name is Susie, just call me Susie, instead of going through the whole ordeal of explaining CE and its origins. Do one more for now, for shits and giggles. We can do so many parts to this. I went to a predominantly white high school, and I feel like all my classmates thought that I could only date Asian people, like Asian guys. They would be like, oh my god, do you like so-and-so? And it would be like, insert random Asian guy, like to them, I can never be attractive to anyone else other than the like freaking 5 Asian guys at my school. It's just kind of weird to me. That's just like weird. But I remember I posted a TikTok about like Asian hate, and my comments were flooded with being like, oh, Oxford study, you're probably dating a white guy, la 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 la. I don't know, like why is Asian women dating people such a big topic? Like, I'm just confused. Yeah, that is some of my Asian racism. I can go into multiple parts of this, but I guess thank you to Love Island for bringing this out again. Bye, guys.
So last time I coined the term soft racism in Asians, and I want to call out my use of the word soft because it really hurt people in the comments. And I should have defined it because Black Americans have been the most wounded by racism, and so I really get that any distinction between soft and hard is practically meaningless. I want to clarify that racism isn't soft, as in light or benign, or diminishing the violent and traumatic impacts of racism across all Black and brown people, including Asians, but especially for Black people. I was meaning soft racism as more psychological and calculated, but not intent on killing or physical harm. And hard meaning with intent to kill or harm, that's justified and backed by the Western eugenics theory of power that drives white supremacy to this very day. And both are still about weaponizing power, and both are still violent, and both are there to wound us as designed as non-whites by either killing us fast or killing us slow, by killing our spirits in a slow death, which is what I think Asians suffer from. And to that point, my immigrant dad was wrong. He's dead, so I can't tell him that. But if he were alive, I would have a different kind of race talk with him. The same ones that I have with my teenagers that span both hard and soft racism and call out white supremacy daily, especially around social and sexual racism and power dynamics that are systemic, since that's my coaching work. I would tell my dad what I tell my kids about how our Asian American identity is inherently linked to Blackness and brownness, not this model minority whiteness, which is the Asian matrix that he and boomers of his generation never unplugged from. And lastly, I want to thank everyone for your sincere engagement on this really complex subject of race and power. They are the same thing. And I really hope that we can keep the conversation going. Thank you so much.
One thing that Koreans do often that I absolutely despise is looking down on Southeast Asians, that they're somehow not as good, that it's an insult to be mistaken for Filipinos or Thai. And a lot of this comes from Koreans' perception that these countries are poor, they're less developed, which are very outdated perceptions, by the way. And not to mention, Koreans, like many East Asians, idolize pale skin. They tend to just not like darker skin tones. Just look at the issue of Copinos, where Korean men go to the Philippines, sleep with Filipino women who become pregnant, and the men just run off back to Korea, abandoning the mother and their children. And a big part of why this happens is because there are a lot of Korean men who think these women in these countries are just playthings for them because they come from a richer country with more money. It's an absolutely disgusting mentality. But Koreans should not treat people from the ASEAN countries like this, not just because it's the decent thing to treat everyone with respect and dignity, but also for the reason of karma, because have Koreans forgotten Byongjahoran when the Qing invaded Korea, called Joseon at the time, in 1636? The Qing dynasty was a country raised by the Jurchens, known as Yeojin in Korean. The Jurchen people lived in northeastern China. Right above Korea, they were semi-nomads who generally lived in tribes without a central authority. And for the longest time, Koreans treated the Jurchens terribly. There's a passage in the veritable records of the Joseon dynasty, otherwise known as Joseon Wangjusilok, that writes, "These Jurchens are beneath us and they are our servants." Joseon would repeatedly attack and harass the Jurchens. They would invade and take land. They would decimate their people. They considered them savages that needed to be put in their place. Well, guess what? These savages raised an empire. They united under Nurhaci, defeated and humiliated the Ming dynasty. Then they invaded Joseon, got the king to surrender, in which the king of Joseon knelt 3 times and bowed 9 times in front of Qing's emperor at the time, Hong Taiji, and promised to be their servant state. This part of history is called 삼전도의 굴욕, the humiliation at 삼전도. This is how proud the Joseon people were, that they recorded this as humiliation because they never thought these people that were below them would ever grow to be so strong. But this was not humiliation. This was karma. And you know what? This can happen again. Sure, Korean culture is riding a high right now. Korea is economically advanced and whatnot. But there is a future where Southeast Asian countries become so much stronger and richer than us and have way more cultural cachet than us. It can happen. And you know, at the present state of how Korea is going, it will happen. And the kind of relationship we will have with them then will be determined by the kind of relationship we have with them now. It's not that people should be nice to people only because of the fear of potential payback later down the line. Being nice and giving respect is the bare minimum. I'm saying this because there are a lot of Koreans who need to hear it this way, because a lot of Koreans instinctively put people in levels and treat them accordingly, not knowing that these levels are completely arbitrary and they also shift all the time. Especially when Southeast Asians have been nothing but amazing to Korea even when we were the poorest country in the world. Because have we forgotten how the Philippines and Thailand deployed thousands of troops to help the South in the Korean War? So to all the Koreans who think that they're better than others, they're better than Southeast Asians, get out of here with that, oh?
I absolutely agree with this creator, but he's a lot nicer than I'm about to be. Racial preferences are very often rooted in racism. Like this creator talks about, you can find tall people, short people, plus-size people, slim people, people of all different characteristics in literally every race. And same with personalities. But the one thing that can distinguish two people with the very same characteristics is race. When people discount entire races of people, it's not usually based on individuals' characteristics. It's usually about stereotypes of that race. And if you're like, well, it's not about stereotypes for me, I just don't like how certain people of a particular race look, that's just racism and prejudice based on Eurocentric ideals. And also, phenotypes can dramatically differ among individuals of any race.
You think black people can be racist?
Yeah. I think reverse racism is real.
Yeah.
Especially if it's like unprovoked.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Rather it's been like intentional or not, or just pure ignorance, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I have experienced some racism from black people out here.
I'm not surprised because like I said, I work in an Asian supermarket. It'll be some black people that's ignorant as fuck. You speak English?
Right.
Why wouldn't they speak English?
Right.
Everybody in this bitch speak English. What you done? You see what I'm saying? Like,
how can they conduct business without English?
Yeah.
Right.
So a lot of the times, like, that actually recently happened, you
Uh-huh.
know, at my job where, you know, this random drunk black lady came up to this little Asian girl, was like, you speak English, like, jokingly, but
Right.
that shit wasn't funny. You
Nah.
see what I'm saying? Like, that's disrespectful. That's like somebody coming up to a black person and saying some shit like that.
The other day, I realized that my friend was too much of a chink. Just too much of an Asian stereotype. Let me tell you why. The other day, I asked him to hang out, and he said sure after my VSA meeting. VSA is the Vietnamese Student Association, and that would be cool if he was Vietnamese, but he's Korean. Go with your own people, man. Go to church or something. But okay, whatever. You know, we ignore that. I move on. Saranghae. We meet up, and he asked me, hey, do you want to get hot pot? I didn't even mention the fact that now he's wearing a Stussy hoodie. What the fuck? Keep in mind, most days he's wearing one of these. So we start driving in my Honda Accord because I'm still a stereotype, don't get it twisted. But he has the audacity to say, hey, put on that Keshi. I haven't heard Keshi in a minute. He hasn't dropped. Put him on. Dude, I miss Keshi too, but damn. Any less Asian? Anyways, after dinner, he looks at me straight in the eyes and asks me, hey, do you want to get boba? We had all-you-can-eat hot pot. What do you mean, do you want to get boba? He tells me that straight to my face as he's hitting a pink vape. Never in my life have I felt so out-Asianed. And I've been to fucking Key Club events. So imagine the way I felt.
South Korea, I think you might be a little racist against black people. 무슨 소리야? 우리가 흑인 사람들 얼마큼 좋아하는데? I'm not saying you don't like them. I'm saying the way that you show that you like them, it's just a little problematic.
무슨 소리야? 우리가 어떻게?
How? Okay, where do I start? You like rap, right? 그럼 내가 랩 얼마큼 좋아하는데? Yo, 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 swag. Okay, so that's what I mean. Like Korean rappers, they have dreads. They're wearing jerseys. They're wearing their pants really low. They have grills even. Do you get what I'm saying?
그게 왜 문제야? 우리가 흑인 사람 그렇게 좋아해서 그렇게 하는 거지. 우리가 respect 하니까.
It's so well-intentioned and innocent, but it's so misguided and problematic. You rap like you're from Compton. You're from Hongdae. You're from Gangnam. You've had a golden spoon your entire life, and you rap like you're a gangster, but you've never committed a crime. You act like you're from the trap house, but you've never seen an illicit substance in your entire life. You've went to cram school. You're a law-abiding citizen.
얘네들 똑같이 하잖아. 우리나라 한복, 한수, 키모도 다 마찬가지 입고, 근데 욕사를 다 아나? 우리가 이렇게 지랄을 치나?
Okay, when they do...
Growing up,
So Koreans are actually one of the most racist people on this planet, especially towards other Asian countries like Japan, China, Philippines. I mean, we have a derogatory term for every single Asian race out there. It's actually crazy. And I look like a Southeast Asian, right? So whenever I go back to Korea and I hear these derogatory terms, I'm just like, what the actual fuck? But on the flip side, Koreans also idealize white people like crazy amounts. And there's literally a saying in Korean called 백마탄다, which refers to riding a white horse, which is a euphemism for sleeping with a white person, right? And to be honest, Korea's never really been that multicultural of a country, right? So like fair. However, because of like media and Western influences, like every Korean just wants to become pale and white. To be honest, like if you want to look pale, if you want to look white, I mean, it's completely up to you, right? So I'm not going to judge you for that. It's your choice. But like, at least don't be racist to people that don't look white, right? The other thing is like, Korea is such a looks-oriented society, right? I mean, you'll notice this if you live in Korea versus in the West. When you meet a Korean, like within the first couple of seconds, they'll literally comment something about how you look. For example, I have quite a big eye for an Asian, so they'll say, oh, you've got a big eye, for instance. Whilst in the West, I don't think I've ever had a situation like that. Okay, like people usually mean it as a compliment and like, fine, thank you. But at the same time, it just shows that the whole society is very much hinged on looks itself. Versus in the West, you know, other values might be more important. That being said, I think like, especially with younger generation these days, like with looks maxing and all that shit coming up, like, generally like society has trended more towards like, you know, favoring people that are better looking, for instance, that fit more towards a certain standard of things, which I think it sucks generally, but in Korea, it's like 100 times more intensity. And I really feel this when I, for example, go to a restaurant or go anywhere with my really good looking friend. I can just tell that the service is just different. It's like it's a new experience, basically.
We have just watched a powerful video of Asian Americans talking about racism within their own communities. And I'm going to be joined by my Black American friend who happens to be a historian to help us unpack more about this topic. From your perspective, what are the main historical roots of anti-Black racism within some Asian communities, both in America and globally?
We don't have too much of really interaction to be engaged in racism from Asians in America, the way maybe it's done in other parts of the world. But we really don't have too much interaction with Asians in terms of their sentiment toward Black people. I mean, we see them and they pretty much go in their direction. We go in our direction. Many of them have their own distinctive communities. And actually, we really don't get involved into going into their communities or for anything because we really don't have a need to do that.
Can Asians easily date Black Americans?
Well, it's not a matter of fact of acceptability because there's not very much engagement in terms of social relationship between Asians and Black Americans. That's very, very minimal. And when you say Asians, what group are you speaking about? For example, East Indians, Southeast, what we call Southeast Asians, or the Mongoloid Asians, such as the Chinese or Japanese or whatever. There is a relationship basically mostly between Black Americans, let's say, and the Asian type of Asians, for example, the Chinese, you may see, or South Korean. That is very common. You may see that often, mostly between Black Americans and Chinese, but not so much between Black American and Southeast Asian, for example, East Indians, or what we call the East Indians. No, that's very, very minimal.
Don't you think Southeast Asians are discriminated within their own Asian community?
Southeast Asians?
Don't they face racism within the Asian community?
Well, Southeast Asian, I'm assuming you're talking about maybe the East Indian group, what we call the Indian group. Those are the Southeast Asian. Those are not the Mongoloid Asians.
Yes, those are the one I'm talking about.
Okay, yeah. Well, in their community, yes, they would experience more of racism or colorism within their group because they are people of color. And what happens is the fact that that's very prevalent in their culture because they have a hierarchy in their color based on colorism. Lighter, darker, browner. Because we have those here in America, Indians, what we call the Southeast Asian Indians, and they vary in descriptions as well. Now, within their nucleus, it's not uncommon to have what we call colorism scheme in their culture. That's not uncommon among Southeast Asian Indians. These groups sort of stay within their own nucleus. For example, the Southeast Asian Indians, they basically will intermingle mostly with their own group. And there's not too much interaction with them or Black Americans. For the most part, no. Not even with white Americans, no. They basically intermarry. They basically marry within or stay mostly intermingled with their own group. But more or less, you have to understand, they stay basically within their own group.
Don't you think that they do that because they look down on black folks?
Well, all groups may look down upon black folks. That's not uncommon in America or probably anywhere in the world to look down, as you say, on black folks. But it's not something that we come in contact with, basically. Because to be honest with you, most black people couldn't care less. American blacks couldn't care less. We really couldn't care less because we don't pay too much focus on that. We don't really go out and focus on that. Well, this group may look down on us or whatever, because we're sort of accustomed to that. That happens from all over the world. I mean, there has been some talk, well, some Africans, they may come to the United States. Oh, we sort of look us nose down at Black Americans, whatever the case may be. That's not uncommon either. But for the most part, most Black Americans couldn't care less. They stay within their own group and they tend to their own culture. So it's not something that they, on a broad scale, they just go out and just sort of look for. They couldn't care less, to be honest with you.
So, how did colonization and Western influence shape the way race is viewed in many Asian societies?
Well, what happens within Asian societies, they have their own form of racism and discrimination before even colonization. It's not something you can just sort of pinpoint on colonization. It's been a part of their culture for a very long time. For a classic example, if you talk about Southeast Asians, the Indians, they vary in complexity. You got the Brahmin class, you got the elite class, which is the lower standard class of the East Indian group. Those are the darker ones. The Dalits is what we call them, the Dalits. Those are the darker ones, the black skin ones. And before then you got the brown ones. Then you have the Aryan groups. Those are the very white look class of what we call Southeast Asian Indians. Well, that's not something that's basically prevalent there because of colonization. That's been a part of their culture for centuries. So it's not really something we can just pinpoint on, like, say, example, colonization. Colonization does play a significant role, I would say, in many cultures in the world in terms of how color is defined in certain cultures. But it's not something we can just define on colonization. For which example, you remember the young lady who was running for president, Kamala Harris. And her mother is Southeast Asian. Her father is a Jamaican. And her mother is Brahmin Southeast Asian. Well, what happened with her mother's group, that's not the lighter, whiter class Indian. Their groups in her mother's culture would look down upon her mother. She's a Brahmin. That's sort of the lower standard of the East Indian group. So, but that sort of identity in their countries has been a part of their countries for centuries. The Dalits, those are the black-skinned Indians. I don't know if you have them in Africa. Those are the very, very dark-skinned, what we call the black Indian, the Dalits. They are what you call the untouchables. In Indian society, their whole premise is you don't touch these people. They are just disgusting. You don't touch them. So that classism has always been there, a part of their nucleus. And this is long before the Europeans established what you call maybe their standard of colorism in their cultures. It also appears in the Mongoloid group. Those are the Chinese, the Japanese, the Koreans, those type of group. They also may vary in terms of skin complexity. That's not uncommon. Kind of uncommon also. You have to understand, all of these groups basically initiated came from Africa. Because what happens is natural birth Africans gave birth to people of all different phenotypes. All of these people, and all of them of us at one time had come out of Africa, the out of Africa migration. And there were a black-skinned people in Asia with what we call mongoloid features, the almond-shaped eyes. Well, they left Africa as well as the part of the out of Africa migration. Then you had the people, the Indians, what we called Indian. They also left Africa because it all started from East Africa. And they left the African group. Now, if you go into the South Pacific region, which I love very much, I love the South Pacific, and they have people there from the South Pacific region, for example, in Fijians. Fijians will basically tell you they know that they are originally from Africa. They don't know exactly where they migrated from, but they know that they are of African descent as well. So all groups have descended from Africa because natural birth Africans gave birth to people of all different phenotypes. Now you have a group of people in Africa, which you call albinos. You know what an albino is? Are you familiar with the albino group?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, they also left Africa and migrated to other parts of the world. One of the reasons they had to leave because they were being mistreated there by the other group of Africans. So they left because of mistreatment. And one of the reasons they had to leave is because albinos don't have colorization. And the sun was too unbearable for them. So going there and migrating to certain countries in Europe was great for them, for the albino group. But they all different groups of people left Africa. Natural Africans gave birth to people of all different phenotypes. So you have to start there. And these, depending on the part of the world they migrated to, and because of the region they were in, they had to adapt. And it took them 15,000 years to populate the entire world. But they all migrated from what we know from the eastern part of Africa.
What role did the modern minority myth play in separating Asians and Black Americans, and who actually benefited from that divide?
Well, basically, Asians didn't really benefit so much from dividing themselves from Black Americans. That was not the case because when many Asians came to this country, we had what you call the Asian Exclusion Act. Asians were discriminated against as well because America really didn't want them here. The first group of Asians actually to come to this country that came back in the early 1800s, and they came from China. And it was called the Asian Exclusion Acts, which basically discriminated against many Asians because they were imported here basically to build what you call the railroads in the western part of the United States. They did not start the railroad building. The railroad building basically in the southern part of the United States was done by the Black slaves. They laid the foundation for the railroads. But what happens is that they had what you call Asian Exclusion Act, because many of them had came here and they had faced discrimination as well. Now, if you move forward so they didn't really benefit so much from terms of any type of relationship with Black Americans.
Many people talk about Asians trying to fit in with the whiteness historically. So has that ever truly worked?
Asians trying to fit in with white people?
Yes.
Asians don't, well, it's kind of funny. Asians don't really try to fit in with white people because they know that they're not. Asians basically stay within their own group. You have to understand, America is very marginalized in that regard. And depending on what part of the country you live in, it may vary. But Asians don't really try to fit in to be white people because they know that they are not. They'll cosplay Black American culture more, which they have been doing for many years. And they'll take on more of a Black American persona, particularly among the younger group of Latinos, Dominican or Puerto Ricans, especially.
And they sometimes use the N-word.
Oh, yeah, of course they use the N-word interchangeably because the way it has been redefined, and you're right, they do use the N-word, but it's been redefined in terms of a term of endearment. But that's basically, and to be honest, I'm glad you mentioned that because it seems as if the N-word is sort of fading out. It's sort of being pushed into the background. It's not so much usable, I think, in regards to the way it once was. Because the culture in America changes. It definitely changes because America is a country that sort of go forward. It doesn't go backwards. Please understand, it sort of go forward. And with this going forward, you're going to have cultural divisiveness and changes within the nucleus of every group. Yes, Latinos, they do use the N-word, but that comes from their more relationship with the Blacks that are here and how they defined it. See, sometimes even in the Black nucleus or with the Latino use, they can use the N-word, but it means sort of like defining a friend or defining that person that they connect with or that person that they want to talk about per se.
Just the fact that you close too many Black Americans and you have many Black American friends, will that give you the right to use N-word, being a Latino or an Asian?
Well, what happens is the fact that many Black Americans have been opposed to that because there are many of us Black Americans, we don't use the N word in defining ourselves. Many of us don't. It's not that all Black Americans uses the N word because we don't. There are many of us that don't. I've never referred to another Black person in regards to the N word. Never. Because I have my own interpretation of that. And it's not because we're Black American, we all appreciate or in the company of those who utilize the N word, because there's some of us who don't use that word. And we have our reasons why we don't. So the bottom line of it, yes, there's some Latinos because of their association with Black Americans. They may refer to they refer to each other as the N word now, Latinos. For them, they have tried to redefine it in terms of meaning someone that they're associating with or someone that they're talking about in a definitive manner. So they may say use the N word. But even in the Black American nucleus, because we are not a monolithic group, there are some of us who don't use the N word at all. I have never referred to someone of my group using the N word. Never.
What are some powerful examples in the history where Asian and Black communities worked together, and what can today's generations learn from that solidarity?
Well, Black American, it's not that Black Americans and Asians have ever really worked together because Black Americans and Asians we don't own this country per se. Now, as I said, in the private sector, as far as my knowledge is concerned, we may work together. But on a collective all, where we are Blacks, we're just going to work in with Asians or whatever. I don't know if any of that history ever existed in America.
Do you know this lady, this Asian lady, is it Holly Kochiyama?
Well, she's Asian?
She's an Asian who fought for the rights of Black Americans, and she was a very close friend of Malcolm X.
Yeah, now, yes, I am familiar with her. Now that does ring a bell. She was also a friend of Dr. King's as well. What happens is that on a very small basis, yeah, she was Japanese, to be honest with you. She was Japanese. We have had some Asians, or maybe one or two or whatever, that have sort of joined an alliance or had an association with Black American leadership. But yes, we have had that. But that's a very, 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 very small percentage. That's just maybe one or two.
I've seen that. When some minority groups started being successful financially, they like to distance themselves from Black Americans. Is that true? If yes, why is that?
To a certain degree, yes, because what happens with many groups of people, even from Africans today, that's been talked about in some of the Black community today, to be honest, because I'm a realist. So I just put the cards on the table and turn them face up. What happens is that historically, the world knows, the entire world knows the negative history of Black Americans in America. The world knows this. This is no big secret. It's no big deal because we had to fight for ourselves. We had to do. After all, when we were the group of us that were imported here to America, now the African countries, they never send one ship over to bring us back. And the dominant society did not want us. So we had to fight on our own. And America is the strongest and the most powerful and the wealthiest country in the world. Now, that is true even today, 2025. There's no country in the world more wealthy and more powerful than America. There's no ifs and ands about it. I won't even elaborate on that because it's the truth. But this is something that they have known hundreds of years ago, the founding fathers, whatever, that America is going to become the most powerful country in the world. They have exuberated this power for many, 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 many years. It's just not something that started today. One of the reasons that dominant society don't particularly appreciate we Black Americans, because unlike other ethnic groups and even other Blacks groups, whether they're from the Caribbean or whether they're from Africa, one of the things they don't do that we Black Americans were capable of doing and have done, we challenge them. And they don't like that challenge. They know they have mistreated us. They know they have done wrong things to us. They know it, and we know it. But one of the things you don't do, you do not challenge us. And Africans and Caribbeans, that's something they never did. They never challenged this group of people. That's why they don't have no fear of them, because they're not a challenge to them the way the Black American has done.
But wait a little bit. Wait a little bit, sir. Here we're talking about other minority groups distancing themselves from Black Americans. And mind you, those are the groups which were also oppressed. But when they become successful, they tend to distance themselves from Black Americans.
Well, I'm explaining to you why they do. They do that is because they know the history of the Black American, and they don't want to be associated with that, because they don't want to be put in a situation where they are mistreated totally the way the Black American has been. So yes, they will make a clear distinction from them. And that happens with most groups in America. It's not anything that's new. As I said, even from those that may come from the Caribbean, and we have many Caribbeans, or maybe even come from the African continent today. They're going to make a clear distinction that we are not those groups, because they don't want to be put in a category to be mistreated in the manner in which we do. Because the advantage we have over them, we challenge the system, they do not. What they learn to do, you have to listen to me carefully, what they learn to do, they have benefit from the struggle of the Black Americans, because we didn't have no choice but to remain here. But it has been a difficult challenge for us. So every group will come. They don't come, they know, well, you Black Americans have endured this. We don't want to be treated in that position. So we're going to sort of stay in our own neutral zone. But what we will do, if we can, is benefit from the struggle of what you put intact, and that they all have done, even from the Caribbeans, whether they're from Africa, whether they're from India, whether they're from Asia, even some white Americans. They all have benefited from the struggle of the Black American, but they don't want to be treated in the regards the way the Black American has been treated. So yes, they're going to make a clear distinction, better than any other group of people in this world. We know everything about America because we are American. We are ingrained as Black Americans in the fabric of America. This is our home. It has been for 500 years plus. So we pretty much know how the system works. And any group of people can come here and they can distinguish. We had this, look, be honest with you, when many Caribbean people came here from the 70s, now you're familiar with the Caribbean people. I'm
Yes.
sure you are.
Yes.
Okay. Many of them, they distinguished themselves from the Black American group. Oh, yes, they did. Going back to maybe the 70 period, yes, they did. Because more than, first of all, they were able to get certain resources from our government that we Black Americans could not get. They were able to get it because the system favored them because they were not us. And the reason the system maybe favored them because they were not us, because they are not a threat to the society the way the Black American. See, you have to understand something about the Black American in America. The Black American proved one thing. They proved many things to the dominant society. You have to understand how it works. Look, we can become self-sufficient. We can produce, we can develop, we can create, and we don't need you. No other ethnic group have ever done that. The Black American did do that. They proved to the dominant society, look, you may control the country, you control the resources, you control everything, but there's a but there. We don't need you to be self-productive. The Black American has proven, they proved that over and over and over again. And yes, our communities were over and over and over destroyed by the dominant society because of their envy and they're jealous of us. How the hell can you people do this and you don't need us and we control everything? But we prove to you we don't need you. We tried to get land of our own. We tried to separate them from that did not work out. So we had to sort of assimilate in a way that the other groups did not, because they can come to this country, even if you're from Africa, you can come in with your African culture intact. You can be American, you can be this, but I know on the outside, I can be African too. Well, see, you have that choice. We don't. But we have proved more so than the African, the European, the Asian, the Hispanic, to the dominant society. The Black American proved one thing: we can survive and we don't need you in your own country. And they didn't like that. They didn't appreciate that. How the hell do you do it and you don't need us? Well, we prove to you that we can. And people, different groups that come to this country, yes, they will make a distinction for the most part from the Black American because they don't want to be a part of that history. Because we share a unique history that no other group of people in this world has but us.
Thank you very much. May God bless you. May God bless you. That's all I wanted to ask you. And thank you for always being here just to answer my questions.
Well, you know something? Let me just cut to the chase. Thank you for calling and asking.